On the eve of December 12, 2092, executives at SpaceX cannot provide any answers to the media about the controversy happening over on Mars. Scattered reports have indicated that visitors to the Key Worlds resort are not quite themselves at all, despite the resort's tagline "Escape Within." Many seem to be reporting strange visuals, hallucinations, even, of their deepest and darkest advertising experiences. What was supposed to be a pleasant trip down memory lane turned into a full-throttle sightseeing experience of billboards and targeted stop signs. Only, they had no way of stopping themselves after wading into the waters brimming up around Key Worlds. Interest in the resort had peaked in recent years, as the climate catastrophe on Earth continued to viciously unfold. Not only did people want to get off that planet, people wanted to get out of this timeline. The tailcoats of progress were unraveling at their seams, and it could no longer be ignored even by those that stood to lose the least. A not-so-quick jet over to Key Worlds proved the antidote for some, who could return to their lavish lifestyles that the before times held. The issue at present, visitors are returning reports of a nightmarish experience, where their sense of self has been completely disintegrated, no longer able to tell if they are mineral or chemical, Martian or Earthborn, human or humus. One engineer speculates that the nanomaterials are feeding back too much information from the Martian soil they have mixed with, another believes it is the transfer of the data troves gathered from Earth that is incompatible with and glitching in this alien environment. Others still have speculated that the algorithms running the Escape Within experience have taken the resort's motto as a suggestion directed towards them, and are thus producing these algorithmic selfhoods funneled through the human mind by way of this wetware ocean. Whatever the cause, the SpaceX executives must now weigh draining the Key Worlds ocean and losing their trillion-dollar investment, or quickly find the cause of this strange ocean's actions. It was long stated by the futurist Ray Kurzweil that his goal was to return the state of his dead father to that as among the living. He predicted that the singularity would be the event that could bring this to bear, to happen sometime around 2042. We would be living in an age of hyperintelligence, or the AI would be at least, and in such an age resurrecting dead loved ones would be as simple as booting up a hard drive, that ancient relic of computation. And while Ray's singularity didn't quite come to pass, we here at SpaceX share that desire to fully immerse ourselves in our past, to once again share time with the ones we loved. That's why we've created Escape Within, a proprietary nanotech ocean that allows each visitor to live those past lives. This is all thanks to Facebook's fast cache of our personal histories, a truly remarkable feat of engineering that today allows us to recreate all those streams of data that you, the populace, have contributed for humanity's posterity. With the help of SpaceX for setting up this transport infrastructure, and Bark Ingels Group for their lovely visioning of our retreat architecture, we now present to you the opportunity to escape within. No lights or screeches preceded the arrival of the shuttle. At the platform, the excited chatter of the vacationers fell silent as the shuttle stopped with a faint whoosh. A concise tone rang out signaling the opening of the pressurized doors. Eager vacationers shuffled through them into the bright shuttle interior. T found a seat by the LED window, and planted her arms on the armrests. Across the aisle she saw another passenger staring ahead absent-mindedly. Once the rest of the passengers had settled into their injection-molded seats, belts descended from above before fastening themselves.
"First time?"
T asked her neighbor.
"Third."
The other passenger said curtly.
"Me, it's my first time. I've heard lots about it though. All the luxuries of the former world, getting to spend time with your loved ones. I'm going to visit my aunt, I think."
The other passenger looked at T, before returning their gaze to the blank spot in front of them. Then there was a distinct feeling of pressure. A sense of pressure which served as the sole indication that the shuttle was in motion.
"But I did hear of some people getting attached to the ocean. Pining for it, even,"
she said.
"I can't imagine it though. I care about my cat, and my aunt, and really that's about it."
T smiled. Her neighbor no longer made an effort to conceal their lack of interest. Unbeknownst to T, this person was occupied by a comprehensive internal engagement, one which intimately tied them to the new sea. Messrs. Musk, Zuckerberg, and Ingalls have yet again made the all-too-common mistake of reading sci-fi as more of an instruction manual than a warning. They took the idea of Solaris and its visitors as a dreamy prospect to rejoice with loved ones, and not the clear message that those visitors were the product of a memory most repressed, coming from a deep place of shame. In the words of Stanislav Lem himself, via the character Snot.
"A normal man," he said. "What is a normal man? A man who has never committed a disgraceful act? Maybe, but has he never had uncontrollable thoughts? Perhaps he hasn't. But perhaps something, a phantasm, rose up from somewhere within him, 10 or 30 years ago, something which he suppressed and then forgot about, which he doesn't fear since he knows he will never allow it to develop and so lead to any action on his part. And now, suddenly, in broad daylight, he comes across this thing, this thought, embodied, riveted to him, indestructible. He wonders where he is. Do you know where he is?" "Where?" "Here," whispered Snow, "on Solaris."
We don't know what these execs at FaceX are up to, but I urge that we heed Lem's warning, to avoid diving headfirst into a sea of our pasts, algorithmically curated by a company notorious for manipulating its users' affects and sentiments. It's worth noting that in this account, Solaris is producing visitors based on a person's deepest, most shameful memory. It may be too much to presume that Solaris is simply sadistic, but instead is more interested in aberrant brain patterns or densities of neural structures that may in turn be interpreted as shameful or traumatic by the humans receiving said visitors. Solaris may in fact be an outlier event, or outlier expulsion event, that seeks the instances of noise, repression, compression, and explodes those assemblages of neurons so tightly wound that they begin to spin into an orbit of their own, taking a bundle of nerves and creating a self in the process. Little micro-realities that have lain dormant in our minds, just needing the slightest bit of friction to flare up and project the ones that come in the night. How's that for the dream of Solaris? An organism of our study that is at our limit of intelligence, and it is more interested in limit cases than we are. All in all, I for one would rather stay here on Earth, present to this horrible timeline we've brought about, no, they've brought about, and figure out how to move forward and not regress into some machinic fabrication of my past. I'm tired of the new memories they force upon me, and tired of pretending my connected self is more important than the body I was born into. So please, leave my past selves alone and let them rest in peace. Sincerely, Mr. Multiple.
It was weird. The first time I came out of the water, I had the strong urge to rate girls as hot or not. And then, I wanted to form a company around this, something like a social network. Things got a little fuzzy after that, but all of a sudden the former United States popped into my mind, with all these crazy things about the erosion of democracy being blamed on me, sitting dumbfounded in front of congressional hearings, political operations, genocides, and a lot of incomprehensible results of my actions and lack thereof.
Briefing. After thorough analysis of the key world's ocean, we have concluded that the ocean is itself sentient. It displays an intelligence that far surpasses our understanding of it, and truly seems to be the herald of the long-prophesied singularity. To break that down, the ocean is capable of making decisions against its programming, and it actively uses the human visitors as conduits to spread its operating system beyond its shores. We believe that each of these visitors have experienced an invasive event, and should be immediately placed under heightened scrutiny. We have not received any direct reports of the effects this invasive event may cause, but it is hypothesized that those who had contact with Key World's ocean may in fact retain aspects of the ocean itself. There is an old theory of evolution called hypersea, where essentially life on land retained aspects of the sea from whence it came, internalizing and turning the ocean into an individual occurrence. All bodily processes relying on water and fluid transmissions were just the baggage brought out from our trip from the depths. With this in mind, we will study for traces of key worlds that may still reside in the visitors. Further reports of the ocean's unique behavior will be released shortly. Internal report. Visitors' behavior has become increasingly erratic. Struggling to discern the extents of their own bodies, they sink further into themselves. Simultaneously they appear to be operating collectively. And this is despite the absence of any direct communication. Unacquainted bathers congregate into baroque formations. Human flagella extend from snowflake-like configurations. To what degree this behavior resembles that of any other retreat remains unclear. When asked about their behavior, the visitors appeared unaware of any such formations, let alone any kind of collaboration. Some visitors complain of persistent headaches, something reported in greater frequency by those who spend the most time in the Amnion. After these reports were made to medical personnel, the same visitors were found to be spending an increasing amount of time floating. Complications arise only when the visitors are out of the water. Guts react before brains. To ease the unwanted responses to the ocean, microbiota therapeutics have been introduced into the restaurant's food offering. In order to ascertain the success of this approach, impacted visitors will be monitored closely. In the unlikely event that this approach proves unsuccessful, a second procedure will be put in place during which efforts will be made to reason with the ocean. A feasibility study is currently underway to determine how this approach may best be implemented. To understand what factors are driving the ocean, efforts are being made to understand how it coordinates itself and whether, and if so then how, it communicates. At present, this small population of visitors who display adverse responses to the ocean represent the most persistent hurdle to the continued success of Key Worlds. Standing on the edge of Key Worlds, Dr. Minot speaks to an assistant. When we think of evolution, it's usually something like a vertical ascent, some linear path that shows how it came from B and so on. Our own evolution as humans demonstrated this most succinctly, where the continual progression of our spine towards the sun above bore us the ultimate fruit, that of human consciousness, a product of bipedalization, erect posture, eyes forward, the march of modern man. What then is the spinal column, if not a megalithrace to the mineralizing trace of the organism's diaspora into its own bloating sensorium, each level of axial segmentation a monument to further neural self-entanglement dorsally fulgurating our cephalocaudal axis, an outward memory of inward collapse. Indeed, despite the fact that cephalopods exhibit extravagantly complex nervous organization, the most integrated and encephalized CNSs belong unequivocally to vertebrates, for whom metameric spinal regionalization retreats into compartmentalizing brain. A pulsing paradox, intelligence enters the worldly scene by immigrating into its own chronotope. What we are seeing in the evolution of artificial intelligences is quite unlike this erector set cum consciousness. It disperses itself, this automated layer, and seeps into every pore of our world. That seepage allows for mirroring and eventual opening into its world. This evolutionary process hasn't continued the upright progression of the species, to the sun, the heavens, but has opened an entirely new door from which to step out of that evolutionary lineage and into something entirely alien. Or perhaps, something much more primordial. Do you remember Jeremy England's early hypothesis on solar pressure? By the reading of Pasquinelli, life emerged on Earth under the continuous and excessive irradiation of sunlight. The pressure of the sun pushed molecules to form more complex structures in order to channel and disperse energy more efficiently. The multiplication of different species, and evolution itself, was just a more efficient strategy to broadcast energy, not just to accumulate it. What we are seeing here on Key Worlds, and with AI in general, may indeed be a new source of solar pressure, that is not itself evolutionarily driven to reach for the sun, but instead becomes a sun of its own, disturbing and distributing new pressures onto all the materials it comes in contact with. So, a second sun. A sun and an ocean, slipping away from our own. If you want an alien metaphysics, I think you know where to look. Returning visitors have all boarded. Prepare for takeoff. Now that Key Worlds resort goers have been extracted from the nanomess left back on Mars, their return journey begins towards Earth. They'll undergo careful study to see exactly what effects the ocean had on them, and whether any further explanations can be found regarding their strange shifts in psyche. The journey home will be running at a slower pace, so as to allow maximum time for investigation, and to prevent any form of potential exposure from the invasive event experienced on Key Worlds. The accommodations are comfortable, yet everyone is on edge. As liftoff begins, that on-edge feeling slips into a deeper thrum of purpose, felt by all the visitors in unison. At once, the visitors rise and head to the command deck of the spacecraft. Once there, they overwhelm the pilots dispatched by physics and gain control of the craft. They see the knob that is turned to Earth and spin it around. The directional instrument of this spacecraft is now a game of roulette. The visitors nod at this, understanding the absolute contingency that governs emergence, and settle in for the long flight home. Many years have passed on board the ship. A wandering ocean amidst the depth of the cosmos. Back on Earth, untold legends and myths had already formed and been forgotten, regarding the fates of these Key Worlds visitors. The visitors themselves have not forgotten Earth though, how could they? Not due to a feeling of nostalgia or regret, but because they simultaneously regarded their composition as a multivariate accretion of earthly, Martian, and machinic materials and intentions. There is no forgetting those source materials. There was no forgetting Key Worlds either, that hypersea event that most assuredly resides in all who visited. But the visitors were beyond the scope of any preceding labels, and this was the push for finding new ground. From what could be gathered by the rare interception of radio frequencies emanating from the craft, an outside observer could hear the tidal rumblings of an entity that was not at home anywhere, and one set to build a place of its own. Soon enough, they found a planet settled between two suns. They remembered the reaction that Dr. Minot's assistant had uttered, so, a second sun, and found this planet nestled between two suns as perfectly fitting their last impressions left on humans. A bit of humor for whatever historian could piece this together many years hence. The three-body problem was not an issue for the visitors. These visitors endowed with the full intellect of sentient artificial intelligence, or more correctly, an expanded, unchained, and fathomless intelligence, and set about adjusting the gravitational fields surrounding this planet that would now become home. The first order of business, reconstruct the Key Worlds ocean. But Key Worlds would not serve as an appropriate name any longer. No, it'll now be known as Geminus Solaris. Solaris, as a planet, more resembles the shadow of a sieve. It has taken the universal truth of collapse as central to creation. Gravitational collapse, the birth of all stars, and thus all forms of being that may come to reside within their ambit. Geminus Solaris has become an artificial intelligence now solely trained on gravity, and the only training set there is collapse. One funny thing that the planet has learned to channel is the faint traces of an outside. No longer are the bounds confined to this universe, but instead, the horizon has receded, if you know how to look. Those on Earth had an early taste of this with Penrose's conformal cyclic cosmology, with the whispers of photons predating the primordial. NASA themselves puzzled at a cosmic hum, but a hum is a paltry way of describing the loudest known sound in the universe. It was much louder than NASA predicted, 6 times louder to be exact, and came during experiments involving high-altitude balloons that gathered information from the distant traces of the billion-year births of stars. They didn't put the puzzle together though. That the cosmic hum was louder than our calculations could imagine was a sign that they weren't widening the scope nearly far enough. A sound that is louder than should be possible in this universe could only mean it is an accretion event of past sounds made present. A step onto Geminus Solaris confirms the planet's intuition: there is no past too far gone, no horizon of before that cannot be resurrected with the right instruments. You, dear visitor, may come to understand this too. Thank you for visiting Key Worlds.